In 1965, long before the world turned Bruce Lee into a symbol, before the posters, the myths, and the unfinished films, there was a moment that felt almost ordinary. A small studio, bright lights, a young man standing calmly in front of a camera that did not yet understand who it was filming. The year was 1965. The location, San Francisco, California. Bruce Lee was 24 years old. At that time, he was not a global icon. He was not a legend. He was not even certain the world would ever listen. He had just become a father. He had slept very little, and he was about to say things that, decades later, would still feel uncomfortable to hear. The camera turns on. A simple request is made. Look directly into the lens. Tell us your name, your age, where you were born. And Bruce Lee does exactly that. No performance, no charisma push forward, no attempt to impress. My last name is Lee. Bruce Lee. I was born in San Francisco in 1940. I'm 24 right now. There is no drama in his voice, only clarity. Even here, before philosophy enters the conversation, something is already present. A man completely aligned with who he is. He speaks about Hong Kong, about entering motion pictures as a child, about leaving at 18, about returning to the United States. And then comes the question that changes the entire tone of the interview. You studied philosophy in college, and earlier today, you said that karate and jiu-jitsu are not the most powerful forms of fighting. What is? The room doesn't react yet, but history does. Bruce Lee pauses, not to search for words, but to choose responsibility. It's bad to say the best, he begins. This matters, because even at 24, Bruce Lee refuses absolutes. In my opinion, he continues, Kung Fu is pretty good. Not because it is Chinese, not because it is ancient, but because of something deeper. It is more complete. It is more fluid. Fluid. That word will follow Bruce Lee for the rest of his life. He explains that Kung Fu does not move in fragments. It does not strike, stop, and reset. It flows. One movement dissolves into the next. And then, without raising his voice, without changing posture, he introduces one of the most dangerous metaphors ever spoken on camera. Water. The best example, he says, would be a glass of water, because water is soft, and water cannot be grasped, and water cannot be punched. Yet water breaks stone. Water erodes mountains. Water arrives eventually. This is not poetry for Bruce Lee. It is strategy. Every Kung Fu man, he explains, is trying to do that. To be soft, flexible, to adapt. What Bruce Lee is really saying is not about fighting. He is talking about survival, about systems that collapse because they refuse to change, about people who mistake hardness for strength. Then comes another comparison, subtle but devastating. A karate punch, he says, is like an iron bar. A Kung Fu punch is like a chain, with an iron ball at the end. The difference is not power. The difference is transmission, impact without resistance. And then the interview shifts. Bruce stands. The camera pulls back. And something important happens here. He is no longer explaining ideas. He is showing principles. He demonstrates how movement alone communicates identity. In Chinese opera, he explains a warrior walks differently than a scholar. Before a single strike, before a single word, movement reveals intention. And Bruce Lee understands something most fighters never do. You're always communicating, even when you think you're standing still. He demonstrates classical movement, then transitions into martial motion. And here, the tone shifts again, because Bruce Lee begins to describe violence, calmly, not emotionally, not theatrically, matter of fact. To the eyes, you use fingers. To the groin, you strike low, from high to low, from open to closed. Kung Fu, he says quietly, is very sneaky. This is not arrogance. It is honesty. Efficiency does not announce itself. He shows finger jabs, elbow strikes, low kicks, and then he says something that challenges entire industries of self-defense. You read in books, he explains, that when someone grabs you, you do this and this and this. He pauses, thousands of steps before you do a single thing. Then he dismisses it completely. In Kung Fu, it is always very fast. One motion, direct, minimal. If someone grabs your hand, you do not perform a sequence. You step on the instep. They let go. This is simplicity, not because it is easy, but because it is honest. Bruce Lee is not teaching technique. He is attacking illusion. The illusion that complexity equals mastery. The illusion that performance equals effectiveness. And then he says something almost invisible, but devastating. Not yelling, not jumping, just excuse me. Grace is not politeness. Grace is control. He shows forms inspired by animals. The crane, the tiger. But even here, the animals are metaphors, not costumes. The crane is balance. The tiger is intent. This is not about imitation. It is about understanding nature. And then the interview ends. No dramatic conclusion. No summary. Just a young man standing calmly after dismantling decades of rigid thinking. What makes this interview dangerous is not what Bruce Lee says. It is how early he says it. In 1965, the world was not ready for adaptability. Not in fighting. Not in culture. Not in identity. Bruce Lee was not selling kung fu. He was dismantling rigidity itself. And that is why this interview still circulates today. Because it doesn't age. It challenges. It asks a question without asking it out loud. What parts of your life are iron bars when it should be water? Bruce Lee would later say, be formless, shapeless, like water. But here, in 1965, you can hear the origin of that thought. Not as a quote, but as a worldview forming in real time. This interview is not famous because of nostalgia. It survives because it exposes something uncomfortable. That strength without adaptability is fragile. That technique without awareness is noise. And that real power does not need permission to exist. The camera shuts off. Bruce Lee steps away. And nothing about the world looks different yet. But it will. Not because of this interview alone, but because ideas like these do not disappear. They wait. Like water.